Yep. So you can see it ain't body work, right? But you are embodied, I'm embodied. If I was to summarize that, we are always situated. We're never out of context. From the day we're conceived, we're always in context, situated in some scenario. And there ain't no way you can separate that out. So from my perspective, when I'm giving a functional integration lesson or even running a workshop, I want to know something that relates to a person's interest, who they think they are, what they would like to do or become, because that is the connection. That's the motivation. Unless that's there, we're just doing sophisticated, how did he call it? Tricks. Nice little bodywork tricks. Yeah? There was a colleague who did a great presentation at at an Australian Feldenkrais conference in 1999. He's called Smith. What's his first name? Anyway, he's a Rolfer, and he's a Feldenkrais teacher. And his presentation was on this business of contextualizing things. And because he was a Rolfer, he was talking about myofascial release, which is a great trick. We can all do, he knew how to do myofascial release, but he says, but here's the difference. Myofascial release, when practiced within the larger framework of Rolfing and how Rolfing fits into the gravitational free field work, and then how that then fits into the social field work, completely different kettle of fish to just relieving something here or something there. So the same thing here. We do all this stuff with our hands or vocally, and we evoke something in people. But it ain't just about the body. Yeah? Now that's a central message to get across. And what I've learned over the years is sometimes the most important things that he has to say are only said maybe once or twice. And a moment and it's gone. Now, when you get your little antenna out, beep, 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 and you start listening for those, you start to hear how it fits together. Yeah. All right. So that's the model. I would add skeleton, muscle, fascia, because without the fascia, there is no relationship between skeleton and muscle. Muscle doesn't connect directly to skeleton. It interfaces with skeleton via the connective tissue system. So that's an important ingredient there, right? But that's the model. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a, I'm not going to apologize. This is going to be a little bit of a lecture, yeah? Because that's a great model, but it's pretty static. It doesn't tell you anything other than here are these things, and that's what they exist. So there is another model that is exactly the same, but it's got a little bit more dynamism in it. It's got more dynamics to it. And please know that at this present moment in the development of this method, there is no theory of Feldenkrais. That's important to know. There is no theory. We're borrowing maybe a little bit of that theory and a little bit of this theory, but they don't map on really well. So there's this continuing attempt to find a theory of Feldenkrais, but it hasn't arisen within the method itself yet. Okay. I'm borrowing from another theory, and I think I've got some confidence about it because In 1979, Feldenkrais was given this little thin book written by Francesco J. Varela. It's called Autonomy of Life. And it was given to him by one of his San Francisco graduates. Feldenkrais read that book. And then 1 year later, he met up with Francisco J. Varela and had a conversation with him. And he said to Francisco, "This is one of the most important books that I've ever read." Now, when you think about how well read Feldenkrais was, I mean, his apartment in Tel Aviv was not an apartment, it was a library with a bed in it. That's what it was. So for him to say that suggested something. And then me doing the kind of historical research, and when you read the chapter on the organism in The Elusive Obvious, it maps onto this model really, really well. So that's why I'm kind of got some confidence that there's some relevance here. I'll go through it. But before I go through it, I'd like to know your comments about what you just heard. Because I've given you my strong opinion. Yes. Chuck. Beautiful.
The thing that strikes me is it sounds like an ideal perspective, like it would be great if medical science and practitioners had that view of treating people or approaching their, trying to assist them in that framework, but many don't, and they're nevertheless reasonably effective. So, you know, if I go into surgery at hospital, they don't want to know my activities generally. Well, it'd be nice if they did, but often they don't. And, you know, you can have a successful knee reconstruction or whatever. And likewise, if I have a tennis elbow, they can treat that. So it seems, I think it's a good thing to do, and you're probably going to be more successful, particularly with a thing like Feldenkrais, in that, you know, it's a longer term thing in order to be effective. But I don't necessarily buy that it's the only way to be for a health professional. Or
Sure, I absolutely agree with you. Now, once again, you have to place this in historical context. So here it's 1981. You know, there is what you call now the biopsychosocial model of medicine, which is far more sweeping, more systemic, like that. So that exists. So that's a change that's within that. Remember, he's trying to describe for the students what functional integration addresses. That's all he's trying to do. That's it. Then you got the thingy?
I was going to say, you've just pretty much said it. from in modern terms, it's the biopsychosocial model for most things of any longevity, but specifically in what I've done is the view of pretty much 3 months post any part of trauma, as in any active or rehabilitating trauma itself, it's held in your nervous system. So from a pain perspective, an ongoing pain perspective, in essence, without those aspects in your life, the likelihood of you remaining in pain and or off work and all of those things crumbling, as you were sort of saying, when they get sort of cut off on the blackboard, is evident from the contacts that you then lose.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite a, obviously, again, ahead of his time from a model that's now rolled out. Most clinics.
Yeah. So the scientists that he associated with, especially Heinz von Forster and some of the European scientists who were developing systems theory at the time, that's why I've called it a systemic model. It's an illusion to think that you can operate at one level and not influence others. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I was really fascinated when he was talking about, well, what would happen if you cut out the environment and culture and all of that, and the person's just the nervous system and everything, you know. And of course, in my counselling life, I'd see a lot of that where people were just existing and had limited environment, cultural links, family links, social links breaking down all over the place.
Yeah.
And the mental health was not good, because you can't just exist as a nervous system, skeleton, muscles and bones. You are in a context, and if that context starts to, shrink or become problematic, then mental health suffers. And obviously that's connected to the nervous system that goes right to the core, and the nervous system suffers. Yeah. And also I really was fascinated what he said about elderly people and their focus on the past, their links with their environment and culture of the past, rather than looking to the future. Yeah. And saying, well, where are the connections in my life? Where is the future in my life? What are the activities that I'm involved with? They actually generally end up being less and less involved with things.
Yes.
And that was, I think really crucial kind of bit of information about working with anybody really, but, the elderly people in particular. Yeah.
Yep. So if I was to...
Just while you're getting organised, I was really aware of someone I'm working with at the moment, and because of degenerative disease, he's lost contact pretty much with the world, and trying to make any change in him is incredibly difficult, because his motivation is just to make his legs work, full stop. And he's actually so depressed and so many other things going on because of his loss of connection to environment. And I thought, one of the things that we lose when we lose connection to environment is our motivation and our reason for making change.
Yeah. Now, is that because there's a structural change in the nervous system? Is there a chemical imbalance in the brain? Could be that. Could be that no one loves him or loves her. I mean, which end of the spectrum are you going to look at? Well, thankfully, we have differentiated practices that can address each one of those in turn. Yeah. So when you were doing the FI/ATM thing that you've been doing, and I set up this continuum. So at this end of the continuum and that end of the continuum, right, with that being 1 and that being 10, and I called it the effort continuum. Right? So as soon as you detected a change in effort, you acknowledged it. Now, we all carry in us some sort of measure that we use, that we scale whatever it is that we're making a perceptual judgment around. So there I am, lying on the floor in the second segment of the Feldenkrais training, and totally incapacitated, having just ruptured 2 major discs in the lower back a month ago. I had literally transformed from being a totally able-bodied, moving around kind of dancer to being this person that could barely move a leg without going into excruciating pain. Now, I had been getting medical intervention, but the fact is that I had a continuum operating in my brain that had nothing to do with effort. It had everything to do with then and now. I was making the perceptual call. This is how I remembered I was then, and I was scaling myself basic on where I was back then, before the injury. So of course, at that particular point in time, every judgment I made was in reference to then, before. And I can tell you, I was performing very poorly. I was always down here. I can't do it. I can't do it. Can't do it. Can't do it. Can't do it. This is where people get stuck, depending on what their measure is. Which continuum have they set up that they're gauging their progress by? Maybe it's, well, Gloria can do it. So maybe the continuum is she can do it, Kevin can do it, you can do it, everybody can do it, but I can't do it. So that's an outside reference. So these things we carry around within ourselves, sometimes very unacknowledged. And it's when I acknowledge that case, it's like, oh, I keep on comparing myself to how I was before. Then I go, maybe if I compare now to the moment just before now, is it better? Then there were more glimmers of hope. What can I say? Yeah. The other continuum, I'm kind of going off track here, but that's okay, because this is important. We might leave the theorizing later. The other continuum is Zoran is fiercely independent. He wants to find things out himself, right? Leave me alone. Let me suffer in my own misery. I'll figure it out. Well, people were kept pestering me because there was another 110 people in the training program. Can I help? Can I help? Can I help? You know, we had physiotherapists, we had osteopaths, we had a huge variety, and they all helped. And I gradually changed my continuum to allow people to assist. So can you see these things stop us? Now, that's a really strong prevalence for me. That's why I love ATM, because I like having the time and space to figure it out myself. Yeah. So I'm attracted to ATM. It allows me to do it. Yeah. Don't so much like FI. Yeah. Can you see? These biases appear in us. So when we start to know the measures that we use about how we're improving, where I am, did I get better? Am I not better? Is this good enough? Isn't it good enough? When they become revealed to us, then we can start to change something for ourselves. So as soon as that was the case, I went, all right, I will take exactly what Feldenkrais said literally. I will imagine everything. And I was already quite skilled at imagining, so that's what I did. It just so happened that we were doing the headstand series in that segment. It's hard to imagine a headstand when you've never been in it, but we did do this, you know, throwing your legs up in the air and then landing on them, the carp jump. I imagined my way through a week of that. And at the end of the week, up went the legs, one landing, perfectamondo, done. It's like, oh, good, I did it, and it didn't hurt. So when you realize, when you come to become aware of your assumptions, you can then start to do something about it. Until then, you are the slave to your assumptions. You are entrapped by them, because they'll come back and you'll just keep judging yourself in the negative sense. Not even negative, but that's the measure that you'll be using. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, good point. I'll ask you. Yes.
Just in relation to that system,
Yeah.
I mean, if we're looking at the disenfranchised, we have to acknowledge that language is, and touch is, the language and in the way language touches us is the critical interface with another person.
Yep. Language is for human beings, language is imperative.
Yes, and of course, I mean, we understand the culture's been removed from existence because the language has dissipated and been forgotten, and therefore everything about that. And so those people who have been connected to that are no longer people.
That's right.
They can't define themselves as the people.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's a source of identity, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And as you know, before we were born, we are exposed to a soundscape, and because it's mostly a human hearing culture, we already are starting to hear the lilts and the highs and the lows. And then when we're out of the womb and we start to get exposed with more clarity, we are always in a sea of language, from the day we were conceived. So it is such an essential part of being human. And then when I identify with a particular language group, i.e., the mother and the father who I was born to, that's my first language group. And should that language group disappear, then there is a loss of identity until I find another identity. So we know that languages are becoming extinct almost at the same speed of species. Languages become extinct. New languages are formed. There's this nice bit of linguistic research study of deaf children from different cultures, and they haven't been taught sign language. But when they got together, they made up their own sign language. So it tells you how strong the imperative, I'm going to call it like this, to coordinate our actions together so that I can indicate to you, first of all, gesturally, and then symbolically, because first it's pretty much iconic, the gesture represents, and then it becomes symbolic. Come here, we're going there. This is a big thing, huge thing. Yeah. Probably let's leave it there. What do you reckon? Come back to the other part of the model tomorrow or the day after, yeah? So that you can see the dynamism. So if the body is always situated, why am I tapping the ground? If the body is always situated, that means there's always some context. There is a terrain. There is atmosphere. There is temperature. There is light. All those things that we think of the physical environment, there is matter, inert, carbon. Yeah, these things are surrounding us all the time, but we are not necessarily aware of them. Our own bodies are surrounding us all the time. I mean, we're matter. So isn't it interesting? He put the nervous system in the middle of it all. It's like and he did it for a reason, because he thinks it's probably one of the most important systems in the body. It's the system that regulates, controls, and maintains homeostatic conditions. Pretty important. So it's not incidental that it's at the center. Yeah. Now, let's do... You okay for an awareness to movement lesson? Yeah? All right. let's do an awareness through movement lesson.